please give me the most beautiful garden in the world. Hi, I'm here. You may know me from my other channel, where we share tips about growing food. Now I love this photo because it shows how you can take something like an old bathtub and turn it into an ornamental piece by adding a little bit of climbing vine. You've got tall grasses. You've got this lovely bush with the purple flowers. They've made a little pathway, and I think that looks really nice because it breaks up all the green and adds a little bit of architecture. Another thing that I noticed about this photo is that there's a lot of repetition. For example, the hostas, they're coming in different sizes, but they have the same shape and the same color leaves. So that gives you a sense of unity and peacefulness. It says this garden was intentionally planned. It wasn't just random things that were thrown together. It also gives you a place to sit and contemplate. So I'd want to plant trees that would give shade in the summer, but still let the winter sun shine through. What kinds of trees grow well in this area? One of the best trees that I know of for providing good shade and for being fast growing and having beautiful fall color is a red maple. I would get those planted immediately, and then I would come back and I would plant everything else. I would also make sure that I planted the hebe that's blooming right now, because I want to make sure that their S always color in this garden. So I would make sure that I was planting things that supported each other. Maybe I could have 3 sisters growing together. I could have a fruit tree in the middle, and then I could have nitrogen-fixing plants like clover growing around the base of that tree. It's a traditional type of garden that has all your herbs and vegetables and things that you're going to use in your kitchen. I remember when I was young, my mom used to have these lovely bouquets of flowers on our windowsills. They smelled delicious, and they looked beautiful. And they gave the house this lovely feeling. I want people to leave this garden feeling inspired to go home and start their own gardens. And having a cut flower garden is a great way to bring beauty and fragrance into your home. And it's a great way to teach children about where their food comes from. Most kids these days have no idea that salad dressing comes from lettuce or that pizza sauce comes from tomatoes or that bread is made from wheat berries. So I think it's really important to have a connection to our food, and a kitchen garden is a wonderful way to do that. And then I could mulch everything with wood chips, so that way I'm not having to water and I'm helping the plants retain moisture. It's also really important to understand the growing conditions of the plants that you're putting in. There's no shade. It's totally sunny here. But you can also have areas of part shade and full shade. This garden gets full sun. There's plenty of plants that do well in those conditions. So I want to make sure that I'm selecting the right plants for the right conditions. I also love the fact that the leaves turn up and down, so you can actually see the sun shining through in the wintertime. Is it sandy or is it clay? Is it high in lime or is it acidic? And then I'm going to select plants that will grow well in those conditions. A 2-point B easily, without having to walk through all the plants. I'd make sure that there were ways for people to get from point. I would make sure that I had gates. Gates are a wonderful thing. Not only do they help keep people on the path, but they also add a sense of mystery and whimsy to your garden. If you have sandy soil, don't try to grow rhododendrons because they like acid soil. Don't grow hydrangeas because they like acid soil. If you have clay soil, don't grow crepe myrtles because they don't like to have wet feet. So understanding the growing conditions that are in your yard, and then selecting plants that will thrive in those conditions is really important. There's also the silver maple. But I don't love those as much because they tend to have invasive roots, and they drop these little helicopters that can be annoying. But the red maples are wonderful. And since they grow fast, it won't be too long before they provide enough shade to cool off this gazebo. So right now, it might be early spring or late winter, and these plants might not be in bloom, so maybe we could put in some benches or maybe some hammocks. I would draw a picture of this entire area, and then I would just start filling in shapes of trees and shrubs and other plants, moving them around until I felt like I had something that looked good. And then I would write down a list of plants that I liked. And then I would go to a local nursery and I would pick out those plants. And I would make sure that I selected plants that had a variety of colors and textures and shapes and sizes. Hammocks are great. Everybody loves laying in a hammock. And if you have a tree to hang a hammock from, that's the best. You can read a book, you can listen to the birds, and you can just relax. I would also make sure that there were plenty of places to have picnics. I would bring back the tradition of having a picnic lunch in the garden. It's amazing how many people that I talk to who don't eat lunch outside, even though they live in beautiful homes with beautiful gardens. So I want to make sure that this garden inspires people to go home and think about how they can bring beauty and abundance into their own lives. Also, I want to add some whimsy to this garden. I think it's important to have a sense of humor. I think having some whimsical elements in your garden can be a lot of fun. Maybe we could have some mosaic stepping stones. Or maybe we could plant some vegetables that naturally form arches like morning glories or sweet peas. Maybe we could have some fun signs with little sayings on them. We could have some solar lights that come on at dusk and give the garden a whole different feel. But when the weather warms up and it's summer, this garden should explode with color. The same goes for fall. Just because it's late fall doesn't mean that your garden has to go away. There's plenty of plants that will bloom in the fall and even in the winter. Look at this hebe, for example. This is the most incredible plant. This is blooming right now in January in Zone 7B, and it's going to keep blooming until April. So that means for 4 months out of the year, this garden bed is going to be covered with these lovely little pink flowers. And what I love about this is that they read just sitting back and relaxing and enjoying the view. There's all kinds of texture and color. Of course, one of my favorite parts about this photo is all the yummy edible plants that are in here. Because this gazebo gets sun for most of the day, especially in the summer, it can get pretty hot. So having some shade sails or some trees around the perimeter that drop shade onto this gazebo in the summertime would be really nice. In fact, one of the first things that I would do is I would look at the house and I would see how the sun moves throughout the year. I'd use a compass and I would figure out which way does the sun rise and set. And I would plant tall trees on the west side of the house so that they would block the sun and cool the house off in the summer. There's all kinds of tomatoes and peppers and squashes and eggplants and greens and herbs. Everything that's going on is not only pleasing to the eye, but it's functional. These folks are growing their own food. That'll be a nice focal point. So I'd love to have something like a climbing vine going up over the gazebo and maybe spilling down over the side of the gazebo. There's also this lovely fountain which was here when we bought this house. I love that. So we want to keep that. It's my own garden, and it's absolutely out of control right now. It's overgrown. But there are 2,700 square feet of gardens surrounding this house that need to be planned for the next 3 years, so that when people come to visit, they can walk through these gardens and be inspired to go home and grow more of their own food. And we want them to look like a magical place. Something like this. Now, I think the first thing I would do if I were designing the most beautiful garden in the world would be to make sure that I had plants with lots of different colors and textures and heights, and I had them layered appropriately. And then you can see just the variety of things that are going on in this space. Now, one of the things that I noticed in this photo is that they've put in some pavers. So as we're planning our garden, I want to keep that in mind. Another nice thing about this photo is that you can tell that there's been a lot of time and intention put into selecting plants that bloom at different times of the year. So as I plan this garden, I'm thinking about how do I maximize the amount of color that's going to be going on throughout the entire year. I also want to make sure that I have some shade plants, especially around this gazebo. But I also wouldn't want to block the sun entirely, because the house probably needs some sunlight to receive the warmth from the sun in the wintertime. Another thing that I would do is I would make sure that there was plenty of places to sit and contemplate and relax. So I think what I would do is I would start with a blank slate. The very first thing I would plant would be the shade trees. As I'm walking around, I'm gone, nah. Look at the soil, and I'm gone, nah. Try to determine what kind of soil do I have. You can have the most beautiful garden in the world, but if it's not sustainable, it's not going to last. I think the most important thing that I could do is to make sure that I had plenty of paths throughout this garden. I think another thing that would make this garden special would be if I planted a kitchen garden. A kitchen garden is a wonderful thing. I also think it would be fun to plant a cut flower garden. If you'd like to learn more about cut flower gardening, check out this video here. Thanks so much for watching.